across the world, the doors are closing to Chinese exports. Chinese manufacturers are rapidly running out of options. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. We're still deep in our fight with YouTube and Google over censorship. So help us out by leaving a comment with the honeypot emoji to show YouTube and the CCP you like the show. So I'm going to give China some credit here. The rise of China's manufacturing sector has been nothing short of astounding. What started out as a few sweatshops in underdeveloped fishing villages in the 1980s, churning out toys, t-shirts, and sneakers for a few Western markets, has turned into an unrivaled manufacturing superpower, producing goods of all kinds for the global economy. Which means working conditions are way better now, right? Right? In 1995, China was behind around 5% of global gross production. But by 2023, that number had soared to around 35%. Nearly 3 times as much as the US, in second place with only 12%. Which just proves you can do anything with hard work, determination, and churning out cheap crap thanks to non-existent labor and quality control laws with massive state subsidies. Most of these products are exported, and it's become the backbone of the Chinese economy, what's called China's export-led growth model. Chinese leader Xi Jinping has been a big fan of this model, so much so that he has even encouraged Chinese kids to forgo college to instead study manufacturing to fill factory jobs, keeping the manufacturing engine running. Children yearn for the factories. Also, this shirt was for sure made in China. So why not go all in on Chinese manufacturing? I'll tell you why not in a minute. But first, you know YouTube has been soft censoring this channel. But you can subvert YouTube censorship by subscribing to our free weekly newsletter. Each newsletter has extra analysis you won't see anywhere else, and it's free. Sign up now, the link is below. Okay, so manufactured goods have helped China score an overall trade surplus of nearly $1 trillion last year, the likes of which haven't been seen anywhere else in the world since the World Wars. But such a massive surplus is unlikely to happen again anytime soon, now that we're in a new world war, this time on trade, and hopefully only on trade. Because in this looming trade war, Chinese manufacturers are facing an absolute wipeout. You see, after China was granted membership at the World Trade Organization in 2001, global tariffs against the country fell away, granting Chinese manufacturers much better access to foreign markets, which hasn't negatively impacted the rest of the world at all, as you can see here from footage of the US's manufacturing base. I talked more about how the Chinese Communist Party gamed the global trading system in this episode. As a result, China is now the main trading partner of more than 120 different countries. But following Trump's recent tariff mania, the US and China have found themselves in an escalating tariff war, with American tariffs on Chinese goods surging to 145%. It's difficult to say how these tariffs will look long term, but even if they were to be reduced somewhat, the high tariff level and the instability of US-China trade relations are increasingly shutting the doors of the US market to Chinese manufacturers, cutting them off from their biggest customer. Now, after Trump's first tariff war with China in 2018, many Chinese manufacturers set out to protect themselves against such a shutoff by establishing factories and facilities in other countries such as Indonesia, Vietnam, and Mexico, piggybacking off their markets to bypass American trade restrictions. But this time, Trump has been swinging his tariff hammer at almost everyone, like an economic berserker. And it's leaving little room for Chinese producers to circumvent tariffs. Even more concerning for the Chinese side, countries like Mexico have reportedly proposed to match US tariffs on China, with a similar message coming from Vietnam, something that's allegedly an element in the Trump administration's efforts, at least for now, and something that the Chinese government has been fiercely warning countries against doing. Though I don't know what that warning is. If you make this deal, it's gonna be good for you and bad for us, so don't, please? There are some Chinese manufacturers that are so propped up on central and local government subsidies and political will that no matter what happens, they can go on as so-called zombie firms, unproductive firms that can just about service their debt and make payroll. But for hundreds of thousands of medium and small manufacturers, that's not the case. Instead of being like The Walking Dead, they'll soon just be dead. A lot of them were already being squeezed on their margins by fierce competition at home, and now, with the very difficult circumstances abroad, they're left with fewer ways to unload their products. And they are frustrated. One Chinese producer of mosquito repellent kits sold in Walmart said Trump is a crazy man after the US tariffs led his products being stuck in boxes in a warehouse in China instead of heading for the American market. I wonder if their mosquito repellent would work on any other annoying bloodsuckers. In another case, a Chinese outdoor furniture maker who opened a factory in Vietnam last July to escape higher US tariffs is now looking to close it, saying, "I've done all this work for nothing." At the same time, a manufacturer of Christmas decorations for US retailers, including Walmart and Costco, has seen his orders evaporate amid the Trump tariffs. According to Reuters, he is now in survival mode. Which is sad for him, but good for US consumers, since we may actually not have to deal with Christmas decorations popping up in September this year. Some exporters are reportedly so desperate to find buyers that they have taken to the Chinese social media platform Rednote to announce cutthroat prices on stuff that had been intended for the US market. Despite such attempts, Reuters concludes that Trump's tariffs could be the final straw for many low-end Chinese manufacturers. Literally for Chinese straw manufacturers. But it's not just the actions of the Trump administration that have brought many Chinese manufacturers close to the breaking point. Last year, India imposed an anti-dumping duty on Chinese products, and Brazil imposed tariffs on Chinese imports, while the EU has launched probes into Chinese subsidies and imports in the last few years. This is despite China's even sterner warning, don't, pretty please. Countries around the world are worried about Chinese exports, worries that are not unfounded. China has fueled its growth by flooding the world with cheap Chinese goods that threaten to destroy manufacturing everywhere else. But instead of scaling back, the Chinese government is doubling down on manufacturing. That's because China's economy is still reeling from a real estate market collapse, and manufacturing is basically the only thing keeping it going. Chinese leader Xi Jinping is stressing the development of so-called new quality productive forces to take China to new manufacturing heights. These include electric vehicles, lithium-ion batteries, and photovoltaic products like solar panels. Doubling down on exports now. That would be like seeing a tsunami warning and deciding that now's the perfect time to get into surfing. The world has not exactly reacted with enthusiasm to the prospect of even more Chinese products flooding global markets. The Biden administration placed 25% tariffs on Chinese electric batteries, 50% on Chinese solar panels, and 100% on Chinese EVs. Meanwhile, the EU imposed tariffs of as much as 45% on Chinese EVs, while Turkey has raised its tariffs on Chinese EVs to 40%. And Brazil has begun a gradual rise in tariffs on EVs as well, as local automakers have raised concerns that the country is becoming a dumping ground for cheap Chinese cars. Which is crazy, because what country wouldn't want to decimate their economy by bringing in vehicles that make drivers feel like a superhero, specifically the Human Torch? So with Chinese authorities ramping up manufacturing on one side and other countries cutting back on Chinese products on the other side, the stage has been set for a showdown. But you could argue that all that sounds way too doomy and gloomy, or from my perspective, hoping and coping. After all, Chinese manufacturers have survived a dismal international climate before and come out stronger than ever. The 2008 financial crisis, for example, looked really bad for China's economy. The whole world was plunging towards recession, so they weren't exactly buying a ton of Chinese exports. But then the Chinese government announced a massive stimulus package of nearly $600 billion, equivalent to more than 12% of China's GDP at the time. By comparison, the US stimulus package of $800 billion around the same time was only about 5% of US GDP. The Chinese package was a massive boost to the entire economy, including manufacturers, but a lot of funds were poured into property and infrastructure projects. Money well spent on that last one. As a result, in the years after, real estate and its related industries soared, reaching 25% of China's GDP in 2021. And back in the 2000s, it kept the country afloat until global growth and demand picked up again. But this time, the Chinese government can't exactly copy-paste the steps from 2008 and quickly open new avenues of growth for Chinese manufacturers to pivot to. Like I mentioned earlier, the Chinese construction and real estate sectors are stuck in a years-long crisis that has hurled some of China's biggest property developers towards bankruptcy, leaving the sector more in need of a bailout than being able to bail anyone else out. It's like trying to bail water out of a sinking ship using a bucket that also has a hole in it. At the same time, the country's debt has spiked over the last decade, especially among local governments, meaning that massive stimulus measures based on loans can create more problems than they solve. Still, the Chinese government has announced that it will help manufacturers and exporters sell their products domestically in the wake of the Trump tariffs, for example, by looking to China's own consumers as an alternative. Chinese tech giants are also stepping in to help exporters pivot to the domestic market. But the U.S. market has annually absorbed around $400 billion worth of Chinese goods in recent years, accounting for more than 14% of all Chinese exports. Stimulating domestic demand to anything near that level in the short term is a lot to ask of Chinese consumers, especially since the Chinese leadership for decades has steered away from empowering domestic consumers, preferring instead to keep funds under state control and relying heavily on foreign consumers to drive growth, leading to a domestic market that is lackluster to say the least. As a result, Chinese household consumption is about 20 percentage points below the global average, which is a huge gap. To fix that, Chinese policymakers would have to do things like committing to changes of the social safety net, with pension and fiscal reforms being long overdue, according to economists. But that would require a complete re-engineer of China's economic model. And even if the Chinese government is willing to do that, it would take years, even decades, to carry it out. That's little consolation to the vast numbers of small and medium-sized Chinese manufacturers who are facing annihilation today. Right now, the tariffs have rattled China's industrial heartland and could lead to substantial layoffs as factories shutter or downsize. Economics professor at Monash University in Melbourne, He-Lin Shi, told Reuters that he has noticed that quite a lot of enterprises have already decided to close their doors. Of course, encouraging domestic consumption isn't the only thing the Chinese authorities are doing. Local governments are extending loans to factories, trying to keep them from having to shut down or lay off workers. That's also been matched by a strong government push to help Chinese exporters find buyers in Europe, Africa, Latin America, and South America. But like I said earlier, the U.S. is a huge export market for China. It's not clear whether all these methods will be enough to replace the U.S. and save Chinese factories. And for once, just making more stuff isn't going to solve China's problem. It's a crisis the Chinese manufacturing juggernaut can't produce its way out of. But it's not time to panic just yet, because Xi Jinping has a plan. The Chinese government is buying up as much gold as they can get their hands on. Gold is a very popular investment in financially uncertain times because it's gold. It's not a stock that will shoot up or down, or questionable economic strategy based on dumping goods. But you can beat China at its own game. You can also invest in gold, which is why I'm teaming up with Noble Gold. After more than a decade of gold companies reaching out to me, Noble Gold is the only gold company I felt was honest. And they're the only one I'm going to recommend to you. You don't have to buy gold, but you owe it to yourself to learn about gold and silver as an investment strategy. That's why I'm offering a free gold and silver investment guide. And if you do choose to make a qualified investment in the next 90 days, you'll also get a free 10th ounce gold coin. Go to ChinaUncensoredGold.com or click the link below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.